standoff. After exchanging blows, the U.S. and Iran step back from the brink of war. What next in a confrontation which threatens to trigger chaos across the Middle East? In the nation's capital, articles of impeachment headed to the Senate. Will the coming trial of Donald J. Trump hurt or help the president's prospects for a second term? And here in Texas, Governor Greg Abbott slams the door on foreign refugees. What does this first-in-the-nation moratorium say about the collective compassion of the Lone Star State? I'm Greg Groogan, and welcome to What's Your Point, where our panelists call it like they see it. Let's greet them. Starting us off, Bob Price, Associate Editor of Breitbart Texas. Next up, legal analyst and Houston attorney Carmen Roe. In the 3 spot, businessman, columnist, and former mayoral candidate Bill King. Batting cleanup, longtime super neighborhood leader Tomaro Bell. Next up, Charles Blain, founder of the advocacy group Urban Reform. And closing us out on the hot corner, writer, educator, and radio host Antonio Diaz. Let's begin. American troops under fire from ballistic missiles. That attack this week in response to President Trump's elimination of an Iranian general responsible for 2 decades of terrorism and thousands of casualties. In the fog of near war, a civilian jetliner leaving Tehran shot down by an Iranian anti-aircraft missile, killing every soul on board. Here at home, the democratically controlled House adopted a mostly symbolic war powers resolution aimed at limiting the president's military action against Iran. And in the Senate, legitimate alarm from some of the president's longtime supporters, Republican allies Rand Paul and Mike Lee.
It is not acceptable for officials within the executive branch of government, I don't care whether they're with the CIA, with the Department of Defense, or otherwise, to come in and tell us that we can't debate and discuss the appropriateness of military intervention against Iran. It's un-American, it's unconstitutional, and it's wrong.
Is the commander-in-chief within his rights, or is President Trump thumbing his nose at the checks and balances fundamentally embedded in America's form of government? I pose that question to you, Bob Price.
I disagree that this is a checks and balance issue. The Americans were under attack from Soleimani and under attack from, Nancy Pelosi wouldn't even take the vice president's phone call when he called to notify her that our troops were under attack. She had a party to go to. So the president has not the right, but the duty to respond when Americans are being threatened, when their lives are being threatened, and that's not a matter that's subject to a conference call with members of Congress. I like Mike Lee a lot, and he and Bernie Sanders now have become strange bedfellows in a new bill to try to limit presidential power. And maybe Congress did cede too much presidential power in the past, and they're going to try to claw some of that back. But the fact is, the president acted properly in this issue. He saved American lives, and he took decisive action that took one of the most brilliant generals off the Iranian battlefield, and stopped a guy that's killed people from Beirut barracks all the way on.
Okay, as we often do, we follow Bob with counterpoint by Tony Diaz.
Well, this is an example of Donald Trump's mismanagement of the Middle East. I think that his ruling is suspect across the board because this chaos that's cost lives is due to his basically erratic behavior. So let me get this straight. When the intelligence of the United States of America goes to him and say, Russia is compromising our elections, he doesn't believe them. He maligns the intelligence agencies. When they come to him and say, well, hey, Iran is planning these attacks, here's this general, he believes them. So anytime the intelligence agency maligns Russia, he doesn't believe them. When they malign Iran, he does believe them. I think the kind of chaos we have right now is going to keep continuing until we have a cohesive effort, until the president understands what he's doing. And he wants to distract America from the impeachment. That's what this looks like. It totally looks rigged. It totally looks like quid pro quo because he's pro at quid pro quo. And Trump is making a big mistake. We should not elect him again because he's going to lead the world into chaos.
Bill King, as you watched this unfold, and I know you have friends in the Persian community, what's been going through your mind?
So laying aside the merits of this particular attack on Soleimani, which frankly I don't think we have enough information to support either of the views that you've heard here yet, I think there's 2 overriding policies that we need to really be thinking about. One is, the truth of the matter is, that Congress has been ceding power away to the executive branch for centuries in this country, almost since the first president forward. And at some point in time, that's got to be rebalanced. And so I'm glad to hear Mark Lee and Rand Paul raise this issue. But the second, more troubling to me, what exactly is our policy in the Middle East? Why are we spending so much treasure and blood and time there? Why are we there? We don't need the oil anymore. Maybe there's a compelling reason to be there, but I'm not seeing the justification for why we're in the middle of this fight between basically Persians and Arabs, which has gone back 1,500 years.
Yeah, both sides this week seem to take a step backward away from conflict. What's your take, Tomaro?
Going back to the question you asked initially, and why in this instance I agree with Mike Lee, because it was not about the policy, it was about the sequestering of the entire by the president. How are you going to tell us what we can and cannot talk about, and we can't debate it and we can't discuss it? You didn't elect us. We were elected by the people, and we want to make sure we have clarity for the country, not about you. That was the question. Yes, I do believe that they were trying to do their role of checks and balances, and I do believe they should be allowed to have that conversation. And I don't think anybody should be able to come in, some employee, and tell them, you cannot discuss this.
Okay, we saw an example of just how fragile things can be when this Ukrainian jetliner was shot down. Many Canadians on board. Carmen, what was your take watching everything happen this week?
You know, I think this is obviously a power struggle in the White House, but everybody needs to keep in mind that this is the military, and there's a lot of secrets, and there's a lot of things that shouldn't be out on Front Street. And, you know, some should, some shouldn't. This Ukrainian issue involving this jetliner is just shocking, that in 2020 somebody would shoot down a passenger jetliner like that, not take responsibility, try and cover it up. And the Iranian people are outraged. And it's interesting because on the one hand, we were talking about, you know, the U.S. versus Iran. And now President Trump overnight tweeting and embracing the Iranian people and embracing what they are revolting against, which is their government covering up information that's important in the globe, of course.
Okay, Charles, you and I have had this discussion. I mean, it could be the Iranians actually want Trump in the White House. He is the one whose stated goal is to pull American forces out of the Middle East. As you've watched this unfold this week, what were your takeaways?
Yeah, well, I mean, if that's their goal, I don't think that we're heading in that direction. I mean, you know, it escalated when they delayed the information for 3 days after shooting down a passenger jet and, you know, attempted to, you know, cover up and hide the black box and all this stuff. And then it comes out that they did it. And so I don't think that we're going to see any sort of de-escalation after that. And so if their hope is to see American troops withdrawn in the near future, I don't see that to be the case. But going to your original point, and I hate to do this because I have to agree with Tony, but, you know, I think there is an issue here is that, you know, the president was within his right, but I don't think it was right. I think he shouldn't exclude Congress from that. And I think he shouldn't, in this instance, when we're hearing Mike Lee talking about the hearings and how they're just kind of thumbing their nose at them and telling them to take what we tell you and be quiet about it, I don't think that's the way to go about it. And where I really have an issue is that for the past 4 years, the president has convinced us to have a healthy level of distrust in the intelligence community, be cautious, you know, question everything. But now we're not really getting any information about this imminent threat, and we're told that we should just trust the White House and trust the intelligence community. And so that kind of frustrates me a little bit. I'd like to see more information. I think this needs to be a more transparent process.
An extraordinary thread on Twitter today talking about how some of the protesters are saying death to the supreme leader. Bob, I'm going to let you close out on this.
Well, what a difference in this administration versus the previous administration when it comes to these protesters in Iran. The Obama administration turned a blind eye to the Green Movement in Tehran in 2009 and basically gave the Iranians the ability to come in and just squash that entire movement at that point. So now you have our American president that's actually supporting and lending an ear, and the Secretary of State joining in on that and supporting these protesters. You know, my job in the Air Force was to keep aircraft from getting shot down by these types of surface-to-air missiles, and so I understand how this process works. And it's a tragedy, but it's multi-level. That airport should have been shut down once their missile attack started. That airplane should have never been allowed to hit the sky. I understand how that radar operator could have gotten confused, maybe a little overexcited, and fired this missile off. So it's a tragedy that is completely in the Iranians' hands.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Up next, Articles of impeachment headed to the Republican Senate. Who will benefit from the show trial of President Trump? That's our topic after the break. Welcome back. The waiting is apparently over. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she'll be sending articles of impeachment to the Senate this week. The Republican-controlled Senate will conduct a trial to determine whether President Trump abused power and obstructed a congressional investigation into allegations he attempted to leverage military aid for a Ukrainian criminal probe into political opponent Joe Biden.
This is actually the first time in the history of our country any president has ever been impeached without an allegation in the articles of criminal conduct. The articles don't allege that the president violated any criminal law at all. In fact, they don't allege that he violated any federal law whatsoever. They don't even allege that he had a speeding ticket. That's never happened before.
The outcome of the Senate trial will almost certainly be decided along strict partisan lines. With the Iranian conflict looming and threats from both China and Russia in the nation's peripheral vision, many are openly wondering, and no pun intended, what's the point? I asked that to our trial expert, Carmen Roe.
You know, I'm not really sure what the point is politically because I thought Nancy Pelosi was moving things forward. Then she holds it back and we think there's a bigger plan out there. Nobody understands. And now we're going to go forward with nothing more than what we had before. And so this looks like a trial that's going to be fast-tracked in and out like a lot of slow pleas of guilty. It's like, I don't know why we're here if we don't have any new evidence. I don't think they're going to get these witnesses in there, and I don't think they're going to bring anything more to the table. I wouldn't go as far as Ted Cruz to say nothing's occurred here, but I think it's true that they don't have a criminal offense yet, and until they do, I don't think the Senate's going to do anything with it.
Okay, Bob Price is aching to go. I'm gonna go to you then.
Yeah, I thought we were in such a big hurry to get this thing done. We didn't have time to subpoena witnesses and actually get fact-based witnesses before the House of Representatives before we draft these baseless articles of impeachment. And so now all of a sudden we can sit around and wait for almost a month to send the articles over. You don't get the rules from the Senate until there's actually a trial set up in the Senate. You've got to transmit the articles of impeachment, and then the Senate meets to set up the rules for that. Nancy doesn't get to play in that game. That's the Senate.
Okay, we're going to talk some more about this. Stay with us. We will talk more about the implications of the coming impeachment trial of Donald J. Trump, so don't go away. Welcome back as we continue our discussion of the pending impeachment trial of President Donald J. Trump. It's a trial Tony Diaz, no doubt, is looking forward to.
I am proud of Democrats for being patriots and defending the Constitution, because it's sad to see Republicans basically allow everything that happened in the White House to get President Clinton impeached is now okay for Donald Trump to do, according to how Republicans are acting right now. And I think let's let this play out, because it's called due process. It's called a fair process. I know Donald Trump and his ilk know nothing about that and don't like details. I'm sorry. We need them all. You don't like explaining things. We insist on it. But I'm also going to hold every single Republican in Texas accountable for how they look over this evidence and decide to stand with the people who are defending the Constitution or give away our democracy to an evolving socialist dictator.
Okay, there is absolutely no chance that the president will be convicted in the Senate. Bill, is this trial worth having?
Yeah, so you know what I find interesting about this is presidential elections are decided by the 15 to 20% of us that are in the middle that decide which way we're going to go. And I'm just amazed that either side thinks that any of us in the middle are vaguely being persuaded by any of these arguments. I mean, it just makes me want to go a pox on both their houses, you know. And so I think this is absolutely a waste of time. I think that it's going to energize Trump's base to some extent. He's obviously been raising money off of it. But if anybody thinks that this is going to have any material effect in the outcome of November 2020, I think they're kidding themselves.
Okay, Tomaro, you have strong political acumen. And we started with the question, help or hurt the president, this trial? Does it help him? Does it hurt him?
Day one, I said I did not think they should go forward with the impeachment. Not because I don't think he did anything. Let's get that clear. That's not why. But he is not going to be convicted in the Senate. It's not going to happen. Like Tony said, Clinton had sex with some girl, and they said, oh, well, you lied to us, and they tried to impeach him, and one side said, okay, the other one said, no. That's what's going to happen. I do not think I don't think this is going to hurt him. I think the information that came out by the people who were subpoenaed, who did come and testify in the House, and you should have people come and testify and speak in the Senate if you're going to have a trial. I've never seen a trial where you had no witnesses, ever, no evidence, no nothing. I do believe that they should, allow them to talk, but do I think anything gonna happen on this? No. Do I think this gonna hurt him? No. Do I think it's gonna help the Democrats? No.
Okay, Charles Blain, you have an extensive portfolio of Republican contacts. Are any of them actually, I guess, welcoming this trial?
I mean, I think from what I gather with looking at the temperature of the base, I think they're welcoming it because they realize how much it's going to motivate the extended base of the president. If I think that the Democrats had a gross miscalculation here that they were going to energize their base by moving forward with this and get, like Bill said, the middle bought into their narrative here, but it's just not working because they have no evidence. And if you think that in 2016 the base was motivated to get Donald Trump in there, when they just disliked Hillary Clinton, how do you think they're going to react this time around when, you got a humming economy, the 401ks are doing well, jobs are being created left and right, and they feel as though the Democrats are trying to steal an election from them. So they're going to be twice as motivated this time around. So I do think people are excited about it because they know he's not going to get convicted in the Senate, but they also know that it's going to give them more energy going into 2020, going into November. It's 2020 already.
Okay, go ahead, Tom.
Democrats can't just run on this, though. Obviously, they need to point out that even though employment is high, 40% of people are making under $40,000 a year. That's what the Democrats need to hammer home. So let's get justice done. Let's keep the Constitution in place, but let's also run a real campaign and keep working class people empowered.
Okay, we didn't even make it through the whole segment on impeachment. We moved to the economy. I mean, is that the way the country feels? Go ahead, Bill, and I'll go to Bob.
Well, I mean, look, I don't think that the Democrats' argument about the economy is working, because the economy is working for most people right now. There are certainly a group of people that have been left behind by the changes in the economy and the transition. But wages are up, unemployment's down. There's just no way to make an economic argument. And all I can say is about this impeachment issue is it is dominating the news. Whatever other narrative the Democrats wanted to talk about, it's getting drowned out by the impeachment trial.
War. Okay, so I'll take this pivot to the economy. The issue is the jobs are growing. The women are now the biggest majority of job holders in the United States for the first time in decades, and the biggest piece of the job growth in the women's sector is in black women, who are growing rapidly in the job force. And blue-collar jobs, wages are rising much faster than white-collar jobs for the third consecutive month. That is because of the programs that the president has put in place.
And the African-American culture, African-American women have always had more employment than African men because they could get double. You get a minority and you get a woman. That's going back to, I remember getting hired and told that in the early 90s. But my dear friend, for you to say about the economy, the way you talk about debt, you didn't even talk about the country's debt higher than ever. And I mean, you stay on debt locally. Debt, how could you possibly say, yeah, you keep borrowing from your Visa to pay your MasterCard, you're not going to succeed.
Got to leave it there. Still ahead. Texas Governor Greg Abbott puts up the no vacancy sign for international refugees. Is it cruel or common sense? That's our debate after the break. Welcome back. Governor Greg Abbott this week told the federal government Texas will no longer accept foreign refugees for resettlement. That would make the Lone Star State the first in the nation to do so. Abbott says Texas has already accepted more refugees than any other state and must focus its limited resources on the immigrants who are already here. While the governor says Texas has done more than its share, refugee advocates called the decision indicative of a shameful lack of compassion. I'm guessing you agree with that, Tony.
This is really the death of the era of Bush Republicans. Now we're going to have to find out who are all these Trump Republicans, and obviously Abbott is one of them. I do want to remind folks that not only is this mean, that if you don't have a heart, I can't appeal to you. Fine, let's go to your pocketbook. We have about 600,000, according to the Pew Foundation, undocumented workers right now. We can absorb it, and also the new economy quantified how these folks give back to the community, start businesses, and everybody would be counted and vetted. Sad day for Texas Republicans. I think we need to really have a day of reckoning. And I don't mind Bush Republicans. All these Trump Republicans got to go.
Bill King, what do you think of this move?
So this is the most misunderstood public policy issue I think there is. So the refugee resettlement program is a very, very limited program. I think last year it was less than 100,000 people came in. These are people that are going through the process to apply as a refugee or for asylum. and they come from all over the world. By the way, historically, about half of the people admitted under this program are Christians running away from persecution in their countries. A lot of Chinese Christians come in through this program. And so I was Interfaith Ministries. We were one of the resettlement agencies. This is not a burden on the state. The agency's taken on. They get these people resettled. There's been zero problems with criminal activity by the folks that are coming through that program who are highly vetted.
Is this a winning move for the governor?
Well, first I'm going to disagree with my colleague here. There were criminal problems with those people that came over, and the top secretaries under the Obama administration said that we could not vet these people properly, and that's what led Governor Greg Abbott in November of 2015 to take the position that Texas was not going to take refugees. This has nothing to do with Donald Trump. This is a consistent position from the governor since 2015 because of the lack of vetting in this issue. The other topic that we raised about the border wall and the courts, you know, the Democrats handpicked a judge in El Paso to make that ruling, and the Fifth Circuit overturned that.
We're going to talk about that later. Real quick, Charles Blain, losing move by the governor?
I don't think so. I mean, I think, you know, it's a year moratorium. It's not permanent. He said this fiscal year, so we're going to revisit it. I think the point of this is to push back against the federal government and let them know that there is an issue there that needs to be fixed. And I think this is what he's doing. I mean, he's drumming up a lot of attention right now. And sure, it might not be politically savvy right now, but he's not on the ballot. And I think it's a great idea to do this just to draw attention to it and push the federal government to try to fix the immigration issue.
Tomaro Bell, good move, bad move?
Bill King, you have my 30 seconds.
You got 10.
Well, all I can say is they are extremely vetted, and out of the million or so people that have been admitted in the last 10 years, there's been like 3 people arrested for a crime.
Okay, we're going to keep an eye on it. Coming up, as top Democratic contenders stage for this week's big debate in Iowa, billionaire latecomer Michael Bloomberg is investing his time and money here in Texas. Our team dives in after the break. Welcome back. As a half dozen Democratic survivors scrap for votes this week on the Iowa debate stage, former New York Mayor Bloomberg has his eyes on a much bigger prize, the great state of Texas and its treasure trove of delegates.
Beto showed that a Democrat can win Texas. We are going to finally turn Texas blue.
Okay, the billionaire spent Saturday rallying supporters in Austin and Dallas, his second visit to the Lone Star State this month. Carmen Roe, what do you think of Mike Bloomberg? You think he can get people fired up here? He's putting a lot of money into it.
I think putting the money into the state of Texas is always a good thing. He's got offices here. He's hiring people here. I think that's wonderful. I think he's a moderate that could maybe get some traction here. I think he's got to respond to this whole large drink problem that happened in New York. This is Texas. We like our drinks big. So I think he needs to address that. But otherwise, yes, I think it's good.
Tony, what do you think of the former New York mayor coming down here, skipping all the early stuff, spending a pile of cash? I think he can catch on with Democrats.
Well, I think local elections have proven that it doesn't take you can't just win an election with a ton of money, right? You just can't win Texas by dumping money in it. I'm with you. Dump the money in Texas. I think the hill Bloomberg has to climb is that he's kind of Ubering the whole electoral process, the whole election process, by skipping debates. Additionally, so like he looks like he's going to destabilize. He's not quite progressive either. He's going to have his hands full explaining. Forget the big gulps, because I think we don't need diabetes. Just kidding. But I got problems with stop and frisk. Yes. You know, he's done interesting things too. On the other hand, so I think at the end of the day, what I'd like to see him do would be to come in but build an infrastructure that he would share with other Democrats. I like what Beto's doing. Beto was magnanimous and stopped his campaign. He's helping people on the ground. I'd like to see some of that. And then I'd take him a little more seriously. But it's not a shoo-in, and I don't think he'll deliver Texas. I think Julian Castro's vice president would for Elizabeth Warren. Gotta say, had to say that.
Okay, Bill King, let's talk about that messy middle that decides who the king will be. Bloomberg, an alternative to Biden, in the middle of the party, somebody who potentially can attract independents. What do you think?
Yeah, I think if he get nomination, he'd be very competitive. I think it all depends, can a moderate get through the Democratic primary or not? That's the question. If a moderate gets through, I think they'll have an excellent chance of beating Trump. But if you nominate somebody on the far left, I think Trump's going to easily get reelected. And I think that's just where we are. And so the question is, can the Democrats, can a moderate get through the Democratic primary or not? You know, I'm a little bit discouraged about trying to run from the middle these days, you know. It's very difficult when you've got these two highly partisan camps that are energized and just all think they're right for somebody to run through the middle. So I'm skeptical but hopeful.
Charles Blain, does that sound correct to you?
I mean, it does. I think my biggest thing with Bloomberg is that he would probably be the most challenging candidate to go against Trump. However, I don't believe that he can make it through the Democratic primary process. I think the base has moved so far to the left that I don't even know that Obama would be able to make it through the Democratic primary process nowadays. So I think he's going to have some trouble there. It's interesting he's spending so much time in Texas. I don't know that it's going to prove to be, you know, fruitful for him, but it'll certainly prove to be fruitful for a lot of the down ballot candidates. I mean, it seems like every presidential candidate that comes here is out block walking with state rep candidates and state senate candidates and things like that. So I think they're going to benefit from it more so than the presidential candidates.
Tomorrow, if the eye stays on the prize, that's beating Trump, can a Bloomberg be seen by Democratic pragmatists as the answer?
That's how he's seen by me. I am about how can we win this election. I'm glad that a lot of people have left the island. I'm still waiting for others to leave the island. But I believe Bloomberg coming on, and like I said, what I'm looking for is somebody, because I do consider myself a moderate Democrat, who can be down the middle. I am not at all far left. Some of this is just, you done fell off the damn cliff. I do believe that if we get our support behind him, like Tony, the stop and frisk is an issue, way more than the big gulp. Hell, about 2 small ones. I care less about that. That is an issue. But I also want to say that when did he get elected? 2002, 1 year after the worst terrorist attack in our country. I'm sure they were trying to grab anything in the toolbox so that wouldn't happen to them again. I went to New York in 2002, and I told my friend, look at these people's faces. At the subway, everybody was, I mean, you could tell the tenseness was still there, you know. So I do believe that is something that he can get around. And I'm very glad to see him come and spend money in Texas like no other Democrat president has done in a very long time.
Quickly, Bob Price, is he the most formidable challenge for a Trump reelection?
No, but I think he is a formidable challenge to win the Texas Democratic primary. The only thing that Beto O'Rourke has proven is that Democrats want to take your guns away from you, and Michael Bloomberg is right there with him on that issue. So thank you very much for bringing that up, and that'll go forward from there. The biggest mistake I think that's been made here in Texas this year is Mr. Castro tying his boat to a sinking ship of Elizabeth Warren. He could have been the ideal VP pick for anybody, but he has made that commitment now, and that's
He's buying a house next door to you.
You gotta leave it there, guys. Still headed your way, a local judge forced to wage legal war just to appear on his party's ballot.
There are outside political forces that are trying to intervene in this whole election process, and my record, however, speaks for itself.
Should a clerical error have really cost George Powell his job dispensing justice? That controversial question is front and center after the break. Welcome back. A pretty extraordinary drama played out this week in downtown Houston. Sitting 351st District Court Judge George Powell had to wage legal warfare just to get on his party's primary ballot. Turns out a day after the filing deadline, Powell was told by Democratic Party Chair Lily Schechter he'd been disqualified for submitting the wrong filing fee. But Tuesday, in a marathon court hearing, volunteer party election clerk Mark Markoff admitted he'd asked Judge Powell to pay the incorrect amount. While Schechter and the party admitted the mistake, they nonetheless fought to have Powell excluded, leading the judge's attorney, Kent Schaefer, to allege backroom skullduggery was in play by Powell's opponent and her boss, Harris County Commissioner Rodney Ellis.
It was one of the nastiest court battles I've had in a long time. You don't get that from an agnostic, you get that from a partisan. So somebody was calling the shots in this deal.
Judge Lauren Reeder heard the case and ordered Powell's name placed back on the ballot, ruling that the party acted improperly. The underlying issue here, is there a civil war that's broken out in the local Democratic Party between the ultra-progressives and the more moderate old guard? I'm going to go to you, Carmen. Any thoughts on this case?
You know, thank goodness Judge Powell was smart enough to get an aggressive, experienced lawyer like Kent Schaefer involved, because otherwise I think this could have gone a different way. The truth is he followed what they told him to do. They told him he couldn't be on the ballot after they gave him incorrect information. But more than that, and Judge Powell will tell you, he is one of these judges who's decided to take a different tact on bail reform than what they want him to do. And so the Democratic Party came after one of their own. And again, this is what good lawyers do, which is shut down the politics and let the voters decide what Harris County is going to tolerate on bail reform.
What's happening here tomorrow, Bill?
Look, let me tell you about this pariah effect, because judges are being intimidated down at Harris County to support this bail reform. Don't get me wrong, bail reform was occurring before Rodney ever got there, but he has taken it to a whole nother level. There should be no way capital murders should even be allowed to get a bail for $100,000 or $50,000. Hell, I don't care if it's $1 million. But there are judges who stand up against that, and because they stand up against that, he comes after them. So I am very happy to hear that this judge is one of those who wants to look at the not only bail reform for the accused, but for the victims. Look at the safety of the public. I have heard horror stories about what is going on down in Harris County, and if the Democratic Party does not stop the infighting, because there's no more straight ticket, we are going to be very sad come 2021.
Tony.
And I think we should give fair time to his opponent. So he's the incumbent. Now he's in the race against Natalia Nato Cornelio. She's a civil rights lawyer. And I think this case should not be, I'm not sure why you're laughing at her name. She has a name,
I'm
Natalia
not laughing at her name, not at all.
Correctly. And I think really what this race should be about, we should not have Democrat on Democrat war. It should be about who's the most progressive and who knows the law more profoundly. And she paid the right fee to get in there because she looked it up before that.
But she has nothing to do with
Bob Price.
So this is hardball politics. That's all it is. This candidate, as Tony just said, is not socialist enough for the Democratic Party.
I didn't say socialist.
So
put words in my
that's,
mouth.
so they're attacking him. However, the judge should have known what the filing fee is. He's paid it before. And then another issue that didn't even come up in the court is he loaned money to another judicial candidate to make their filing fee. That violates, I think, some pretty serious judicial ethics rules.
10 seconds.
We've come a long ways from when the Democrats couldn't find anybody to run in the primary.
Up next, the ex-cop at the center of the deadly Harding Street drug raid has been accused of purposely putting an innocent man in prison. We're going to talk about the latest ugly chapter in the career of former HPD detective Gerald Goines when we come back.
What we're really concerned about is that an innocent person was framed and convicted, spent time behind bars, and has been on parole since. Our job as prosecutors, we're the guardians of justice. It's our job to get the right guy.
More big-time trouble this week for Houston's most notorious ex-cop, former HPD detective Gerald Goines, the ringleader of the fatally disastrous Harding Street drug raid, has been credibly accused of delivering false testimony and framing Otis Mallet Jr., who was sentenced to 8 years on a 2008 cocaine trafficking charge. Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg said Goines lied to prosecutors and suppressed evidence. The lingering question, how deep will this corruption run and how many lives have already been destroyed? Okay, I'm going to ask this to Carmen Roe. What do you think of this case?
You know, it's unbelievable that this could have been going on with HPD as long as it had, and that we're getting so much information from this one dirty cop. And, you know, Goines didn't show up at this hearing, and kudos to Judge Franklin, who made him come down there and stand before this gentleman who's been in custody since 2008 on a charge that never occurred. He made the whole thing up. It's shocking to think that that could be occurring in 2020 or in 2008. And again, kudos to Kim Ogg, who says she's going to charge him likely with things like official oppression associated with the allegations associated with this case, in addition to the others. Some people don't think there's any point in going after somebody who's already going to jail, who's already under indictment. I think it's absolutely important to charge him in each and every instance where there was a victim of the criminal justice system involved.
Yeah, he's facing a murder charge. Bill King, you've seen some other potential ramifications.
Yeah, I can't imagine what the ultimate civil liability for the city of Houston is going to be on this. We're talking about many, many millions of dollars. I mean, there's going to be one civil lawsuit after another filed on this. And I think the question we need to be asking, how did this happen? How did one officer have this much unchecked authority? What were the procedures that are in place? What are the checks and balances? And I'm not hearing any discussion about that. Is this going on someplace else that we don't even know about right now? And it's a complete internal control failure that we need to get a handle on.
Tomorrow, what are you hearing in the neighborhoods?
Batman and Robin. This is what they were called in Sunnyside, South Park, 3rd Ward. I'm happy to hear that you're surprised at this, where you come from. Unfortunately, this is very common occurrence in the African American community. He had been doing this for years, I don't know if you've even discussed how many people this man has killed as an officer, who he, it was a justified or whatever. He killed somebody on the freeway and said, oh, he thought it was something else, and he got away with it. The ramifications, and what bothers me is, this man was a police officer for over 30 years. It's no way somebody didn't know. And I promise you, he ain't the only one. And I'm like Bill said, when the piper has to be paid, it is going to be humongous, because there are lives that he considered worthless who are gone, whose family felt they had no repercussions. But now that this has come out, now they can come forth and get justice.
Okay, we're going to keep an eye on it. Coming your way, another round of developments on the southern border, and a question: are Trump's hardball tactics slowing the rate of illegal immigration? Stay with us. There's more of What's Your Point headed your way. Welcome back. 2 developments this week in what we have come to know as the border crisis. First, according to reporting by our own Bob Price, apprehensions of migrants by ICE agents is down significantly, 75% since the height of the onslaught last year. The belief is fewer folks are trying to enter without permission. Secondly, a victory for the Trump administration after the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled the president has the authority to transfer more than $3.5 billion from America's military budget to construct the border wall. And previously mentioned, we're going to go to Bob Price on this.
Well, I know Tony's going to disagree with this, but the facts are indisputable in this particular case. So the numbers were 132,000 that crossed the border that were apprehended crossing the border illegally in May. The president implemented strict policies on enforcement, Remain in Mexico program, getting the Mexican government to implement its own National Guard and enforce its own immigration laws, getting Honduras to cooperate, getting Guatemala to cooperate. That number has now fallen to about 30,000 people apprehended crossing the border. That's a significant drop and a tremendous success of the president on this issue. On the issue of the border wall, the president has built 100 miles of new walls so far in his term. The DHS secretary came out this weekend and said they're probably not going to hit their goal of 450 miles, and that's due to the obstruction of Congress in trying to get this issue resolved.
Tony.
Those numbers are skewed. Doesn't even take into account all the tragedies that are happening because legitimate asylum cases are being deported to other countries. Additionally, I love the way these numbers ignore the whole idea that cartels are now attacking U.S. citizens. I got no time to dive into that, because really what's really mind-boggling is the mismanagement of the border by talking about this funding for this little section of wall coming from the military. Because I don't remember Trump's slogan being, let's build the wall and have the U.S. military pay for it. And really, this win, it's like buying a $3 billion glacier and dropping it in the middle of the desert, because it's going to melt. You got 3 miles. You got 997 more miles to go. Waste of time while we're spending real money on our soldiers fighting in the Middle East. This president has mismanaged everything.
Charles Blain, what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, Tony, we could talk about the Middle East and cartels and everything else under the sun, but this topic is about border crossings, and they, according to Bob's reporting, according to the report we got from the U.S. Border Patrol, they are down. And so clearly the president is doing something. I think coordination, like Bob said, with Honduras and Mexico and Guatemala has clearly worked. And I'd prefer if he just doubled down on what we've done in the past rather than moving forward with the wall, because we really don't need to eminent domain people's property if the processes and things that you're doing already is working.
But did he say the military would pay for it?
Hold on. Bill King, you've been following this issue.
I think Charles makes a good point, which is you've reduced it 75% by using non-wall solutions. So if those are working, why aren't we doubling down on those?
I saw Carmen nodding there. You agree?
I think so, yes. But I do think that important in the Fifth Circuit opinion that we haven't really talked about is, while the Fifth Circuit said the same thing the United States Supreme Court said, which is that these people don't have standing to challenge whether or not these funds can be used, there's still an issue out there about whether these funds will be used or can be used for the wall. And so that's something that continues to go through the appellate process.
Do you think it'll end up before the High Court, the Supreme Court?
Oh yeah. And this is going to be a continuing issue until somebody, the right litigant, gets in there and we can actually talk about the substance of this.
5 seconds.
All right, real quick. The issue of the wall would do nothing to stop these migrant families coming across. The wall is there to protect national security interest and drug enforcement.
And waste money.
Gotta leave it there. Still to come, the state pulls the plug on a vanity plate critical of the president. Is it heavy-handed censorship or justifiable regulation? Should be a lively discussion, so don't go away. Here's a topic certain to prickle your partisan fancy. A Fort Worth man ordered and received a vanity license plate with the inscription Jail 45, a reference to the 45th and current president. Somebody complained to the DMV, which astonishingly revoked the plate. Owner Jerry Balkenbush considers it a violation of his First Amendment right. The Texas DMV says it is abiding by a rule prohibiting derogatory language. Okay. Tomorrow, you think he should be able to keep that plate?
I definitely believe he should have been able to keep that plate. And they assumed he meant jail 45. The favorite 45 for you young people, that's called a record, that his daddy used to play for him was Jailhouse Rock by Elvis Presley. So he put jail 45 in honor of his dad.
Bob Price, your libertarian bone coming out here?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a free speech issue. This is not any kind of thing. You know, the barbecue Beto plate, I get that. You know, you don't need that kind of language out there. But expressing a pure political opinion that you think the president ought to be put in jail, you got the right to say that.
Tony.
Well, if he can't have it and gave it back, I'm going to try and buy it. And, I will drive it to the Supreme Court.
Charles Blain.
Well, that's funny because I thought it was Tony's plate when I I agree. I think it's stupid. It's maybe a little offensive to people who are a little thin-skinned, but it's not threatening or anything like that. The barbecue Beto one, that's a little more crazy. So leave the plate. Let the guy get it.
Okay, Counselor Carmen Roe, what do you think?
You know, it's funny. One, he didn't appeal, so we're never going to know whether or not the First Amendment's implicated in this. But I think everybody agrees it is because we can all disagree or agree about whether he should have it. The funniest thing about this is that he turned around and asked for and got Obama as his license plate. So that's the man driving around with the Obama plates. It's actually jail 45.
Real quickly, Bill King.
I just don't understand why people do this. Do they think that anybody's going to be persuaded by a license plate that says jail 45? Oh, wow, now I understand that Trump's a bad guy.
We're going to leave it there. We'll continue our discussion of national and international politics with Fox News Sunday and its host, Chris Wallace. Hey, have a great week, everybody. Thanks for joining us.